This is for Abby as much as whoever. I know, that's why I said this is for Abby. Yeah, so this is for Abby. Again, so this is a connect the dots thing. This is a big picture thing. You've done a lot of reading, and so this is you've got in front of you a terms list that's in chronological order and such. Peak of wave 4 all the way to the crash of what you just finished reading, and even beyond that, so keep this, all right? I want to preface it by saying, if I were to say, last Zheng He, and then the king who cried wolf, could you actually go, you know what, those are the two, like, if I know those two things, I can connect those dots. Last Zheng He to the king who cried wolf. How are those, like, chapter beginnings? Yeah.
After a while, dynasties start to produce losers and then they fall apart.
Okay, you sort of get it. What I'm trying to get through to you here is that things like the Joe Achilles heel, killing the Pope, things like that, they are my attempts to give you actual, like, pegs to, like, actually, you know what, I can, like, string the story from that little thing to that, the Achilles heel of Joe feudalism. That started when the Joe took over the Shang, and it was an Achilles heel. Well, who finally solved it? How was it an Achilles heel? We saw it in the Eastern Zhou, which led to the Warring States, and then we saw that Achilles heel solved by Qin Shi Huangdi, and things like that. So, in the same way, there are a few things here that really should make you able to tell the story, because it is a story. These aren't just a bunch, it's not one damn pack after another, to quote Jared Diamond. It is actually a cause and effect story, all the way through, dominoes falling. So let's connect these dots. Now, I'm not going to labor Zheng He and the height of the Qing, and the fact that Asia was a sea power until they isolated themselves afterwards in 1435, and then in 1550, we see Portugal and Spain arrive. If you don't know what Western imperialism is, don't embarrass yourself by going into college unable to define this term. So Western imperialism is simply the West taking over and colonizing. You saw Portugal do it, start doing it, when it arrived in the Indian Ocean. Unlike the Chinese, the Portuguese, and then the Spanish move on to start conquering the lands they encounter, not just trade with them and make tribute relations. On your packet, there is this concept of mercantilism. I typically try to avoid the sort of academic boring stuff, the economic stuff. This is important because here's why. So you've got it in front of you. You've got mercantilism in front of you in bold print. Here's your definition of it. Does anybody know it? Avinash.
I kind of have two views, like there's two definitions given to me, both somewhat same. Basically, the Europeans viewed trading as a gain-loss system. So the more you exported, the more you gained, the more you imported, the more you lost. So basically, they used colonies to avoid importing overly much, so that they could directly extract like natural resources from the colonies and not have to pay for the natural resources from other countries.
That's very well put. All right. The important detail here, though, is who controlled the trade? Was it a free market thing where individual traders did this colonizing, or was it state-sponsored?
State-sponsored.
Okay, so this is pre-capitalist, guys. Mercantilism is, and our best example is the British East India Company. Who chartered it? Who gave the British East India Company its corporate authority and approval? You can be a corporation. You can go and conquer and colonize. Who gave the British East India Company the seal of approval?
The king.
Or actually the Queen. Yeah, Queen Elizabeth. And so the key point here is capitalism a state-sponsored international commerce system? Okay, simply put, capitalism is a free market. The government is not involved in it, right? And so, the main point here, in Europe, during the Age of Exploration, Europe itself was closer to the Qing dynasty, or to the Ming dynasty. The state, the crown, the throne controlled the economic relations with other countries. it's pre-capitalist. Now, so going back to, whoa, Ming gives Macau to Hong Kong? What? All right. Sorry, I was smoking. No, it's just now. It's just turning on. Come on, little computer friend. Thank you. Okay, Macau to Portugal. If you can't picture Macau, I hope you can picture Hong Kong, because it's right across Hong Kong. The other huge thing is the Canton policy. Now, you've come across this in your readings briefly, but to underscore it, after the Ming isolated, they said, we don't want international trade anymore. Like the Zheng He things. We don't want to spend all that money, blah, blah, blah. To discourage trade, we're only letting traders trade in one port on the entire thousands of mile long Chinese coastline. Only one port can importing and exporting go on, and that's in Canton, down south. Today it's Guangzhou, and it's right across the river from Hong Kong. So it's on the mouth of the river, right across from Hong Kong, Canton. That's why it's a port city. So that's the Canton policy. That means that the Portuguese, the Spanish, the British, anybody who wants to trade with China and buy that silk, that tea, that porcelain, that china, to import it to their own country, can only do it 6 months out of the year, once a year, and they can't stay. Worse yet, to the foreigners, they were not allowed to learn Chinese. Chinese were not allowed to teach them Chinese. They were not allowed to come inside the city wall, these barbarians. They were only allowed to do business outside the city walls, because China did not want the world coming into it. They didn't want, and at this point, can you blame them? Because they've had the Mongols, they've had the Xianbei, they've had all sorts of foreign disturbances. On the other hand, Portugal was a very nice place to live. As expat living went, your parents are expats, most of you. They're business people living abroad in a foreign country. Some expat jobs suck, you know it. You go to some countries and it's like hardship. Oh my God, I'm going to name one.
India.
Huh? Where?
Bangladesh, Afghanistan.
Bangladesh, Afghanistan, okay, yeah.
On there.
Okay, thank you. Right? Portugal was the like cush job. Going to Portugal, they had nice houses. The Chinese actually gave the Macau people and the Canton people servants and all sorts of like amenities to make them feel at home. Translators, all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
You keep saying Portugal, you mean Macau? Or,
The Portuguese at Macau.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, so Ricci enters China in the late Ming, you know that. And after Ricci dies in 1610, 30 years later, in come the Manchus, the Qing, from the north, through Beijing. Why they helped, just if you're curious, like how did the Manchu come? You know, how did the Qing start? The Ming was declining, same old thing, worthless sons. The Mongols start making trouble. And the Ming are like, hey Manchus, will you help us against the Mongols? And the Manchus are like, yeah, we will. And in fact, after we help you take care of them, we're going to take care of you. And the Manchus invade, they overthrow the Ming, and yet again, China is ruled by foreign, quote, barbarians. That's 1644. You already know about Kangxi and the rights controversy. So this is the saints marching out. They came marching in with Ricci, they go marching out with Kangxi. Around this time, this is when the British East India Company really does colonize India. Notice it's a crown-backed, crown-chartered corporation in charge of importing resources, mercantilist style, as Avinash just said. The mother country wants colonies so that they can take the raw resources of the colonies, bring them back to England, cotton from India, raw cotton, make it into textiles in England, and then sell the shirts back to the Indians, right? So we're gonna import the raw materials, they're cheap. We're gonna make them into finished products, they're expensive. And we're gonna export the finished products back to the colonies, thereby making a profit. So England didn't conquer India. The British East India Company conquered India. And this is in the early 1700s. Again, I've already said this, whoa, Europe is mercantilist, it's not capitalist. If you want the definition, again, this idea of a charter, You're chartering companies. You're actually, the king or queen is giving the company his or her stamp of approval. The goals of mercantilism, colonize. Like I just said, exploit raw materials. Make them into finished products at home. Export them for profit. Why? As Avinash said, Avinash, you were right on. You want the silver and gold of other countries to come to you. That means you want to export. You want them to buy and their silver and gold to come into your revenues, your treasury. You don't want to spend any of your silver or gold on other countries' exports. So it's a zero-sum type of economic theory. And why? I've had this debate with some people, I'm not in here, but Europe never had a Chinchirhuangdi. Europe never had a sway to unify it again after it fell. And so that means that there are still warring states in Europe. Europe has been a warring states period since the fall of the Roman Empire. It still is today. And so each country, Spain, Portugal, England, Dutch, they all require large military budgets. So they all want more silver so that they can have a bigger army to defend themselves against their neighbors. You just got to wonder if Europe had a Chinchirhuang or a sway, if it would have been so colonial and so militaristic.
Didn't
Yeah.
Napoleon kind of come close to that?
He did come close to it. I know, and so did Charlemagne. So you had some, okay, great Napoleon, you did it for 20 years. That's not enough. System
Okay.
was maintained, except for the POV, until 100 years ago. The imperial system, not the dynasties, but the imperial system of a Confucian simple bureaucracy,
Okay.
which keeps the warring states from warring, because they're no longer states, they're part of a united polity.
All right.
All right, so again, trade's controlled by European monarchs. Now guys, this is all boring stuff but without it, Chinese history is half as interesting. When you understand this stuff, then it gets interesting. All right, so eat your spinach here. Trade is controlled by European monarchs. It's not a free market system. So it's not free trade, it's state-controlled trade. But the British East India Company is doing really well because they've got a monopoly, a state-sponsored monopoly. You're the only people who can do the trade with India and everywhere else. So the people who are working for the British East India Company, they're not saying, hey, free enterprise, free market, we want a free market. No, they're like, this is sweet, we have no competition, we're living high on the hog. They're making great profits. Well, what are they making their profits on? What's right in front of you right now? Tea and porcelain. This is what Britain wants. This is what Britain is buying, literally by the boatful. And it creates, as you read, a trade imbalance, and all the British silver is flowing out of India and into China, and it's a huge trade imbalance. Now, let's see. So that's a 1776. Many things start to change. If you haven't heard of this and you want to be an educated person, you should have heard of this by now. You should have heard of this in like World History or Western Civ, the Bible of Capitalism, Adam Smith's On the Wealth of Nations. It's a radical economic book. Today it's normal and conservative. Oh, free markets, of course. Free markets are the best. This is America's religion, free markets. It was radical then because mercantilism was known, state control was known. Adam Smith writes that the government should get out of the way and let entrepreneurs, individual businessmen, compete in the market. At the same time that he wrote that, and there's a poetic irony in this, the United States overthrew the British. And the great capitalist power today was born the same year as the great capitalist manifesto, Adam Smith. And the French Revolution is going on at the same time. You've learned this before, but you're going to see how it affects China now. How many of you can give me a definition of liberal democracy? Elijah, I hope you're taking notes. I hope you're actually actively working to learn this. Alex, you too. How many of you can give me a good good college try to define liberal democracy. Thank you, Ben.
It's where it's a government that's decided by the people and is also very active in those people's lives, like their actions are liberal rather than conservative.
What is, okay. Throw away the American liberal conservative language, that's modern. Yep,
It gives the people certain rights,
thank you. What rights?
rights of speech, of choice.
All of the individual human rights that we're talking about today, right? You human rights activists for International Peace Day and such, you Free Tibet people, all that. When I'm asked to sign a Free Tibet thing, I'm always like, you know what, I haven't decided yet. Because individual human rights, notice what's the first word of that phrase? Individual. Notice, is China an individual civilization? Is it saying that the individual is the most important thing? So there is a clash here. And yes, the UN has published this Universal Bill of Human Rights, individual human rights. But that's a Western imposed universal thing. It's almost a religious concept that this is the absolute truth. It's like there's only one God, there's only one way to look at the rights of man. The Chinese have always said, no, it's not the individual, it's the social. Yes, Kim Jen, your hands up.
Oh, but wasn't democracy like first used in like Greece?
Yeah, but that was a long time ago and a very different thing. By a long time ago, I mean it fell around 300 BC, so it didn't come back for another 2,000 years.
And it wasn't in the same form either.
Yeah, it was direct.
When you say social, you mean community, right?
Yeah, society, the group, the family, right? Think of Confucianism. Is your right to be free as an individual, does it override your duty to fulfill the role of son, father, subject, brother, husband? No, your relationships. Your harmony with society is the most important thing, not your individual right. So let's talk about the wealth of nations first. Capitalism. You have it somewhere on your thing. If you don't know the definition of capitalism, I hope it's not your last chance, but it might be. So the wealth of nations, it was the Bible of free market economic policy. Notice free markets. This is when that was born, 1776, not long ago. Its beliefs are the government should not regulate trade. It was radical because it said mercantilism should go. It was against those monopolies that the British East India Company was like saying, we love it. Capitalism's against it. Just an interesting factoid, I actually published about this. Adam Smith himself in this Bible of Free Market Capitalism, he says there's one place that the free market should not, that the government should not leave unregulated, it's finance and banking. Do not let the financial or the banking sector be unregulated, because that's like saying, okay, fox, guard the hen house. You cannot trust people standing next to a pot of gold to say, oh, government, you don't need to regulate us, we'll just be responsible. Adam Smith, the god of free market capitalism, himself said, you must regulate the finance and banking sectors. Yes?
But if it's regulated, then there's a possibility that government might use it for their own benefits.
I think, but the assumption is, I think that the people are going to be more corrupt than the government is generally.
And regulation is different than ownership.
Nowadays.
Yeah, look, you have inspectors go in, they check your books and so forth. Is there still room for abuse? Yes, but one does the best they can. Are you gonna let the fox guard the hen house, or are you gonna let, like, I don't know, like a guy who might like enjoy eggs, but he's got enough money to buy eggs? Guard the hen house. Hens lay eggs. Okay. Getting back to our story. So this is our normal today. This is what capitalism in America is all about today, and the West is about today. And to bring it home, if you don't get why we're talking about this is what America is wagging its finger at China and preaching that China should be doing too. Just like the Catholics were coming in saying, you should all be believing in our God, America is now saying, you Chinese should be liberal Democrat. You should be liberal democratic, just like us. And capitalist. There's only one correct economic system, it's the Western capitalism. There's only one correct political system, it's the democratic. There's only one correct way to think of the individual, and it's individual human rights. our last 2 days of this semester, we will talk about China's response to that now. So it argues that entrepreneurs, individual citizens, create business, take risks, can create a more perfect system of production than state-designed economies. State, get out of the way. Individuals can do it better. And this is his most famous metaphor, the free hand, the invisible hand of the market. He says that the market will just like perfect itself without the government. How? The invisible hand, almost a godlike thing. Like just trust the forces of the market. If there's a lack, a businessman will see the lack, create a business to fulfill it. If there's a need, a businessman will find that need, and the profit motive will drive him to fulfill that need. So it's all self-improving and self-regulated. Government, get out of the way. This is the Mitt Romney view, right? And again, at the same time, the American Revolution against George III. This has huge effects on China because later the British East India Company monopoly ends and the free market capitalists win and England goes capitalist. How does this have an effect on China? Who's the only company that's been able to like make the money off the tea and porcelain? The British East India Company. The Canton policy would not let the free traders come in. And there's only one port. So now that England has said no more monopoly for the British East India Company, all the free marketers are hopping on boats and they're coming to China. We want a cut of this action. In the 1790s, the French Revolution happens. So here's liberal democracy for you. Radical, like capitalism, have the Jesus in the Bible today, the gospel of the West. The right way, the only way, the universal way. Based on individual human rights. And the Chinese do say this. They're like Westerners. You talk about politics and economics like fundamentalist religious people. They do. This is what they say. They say, you are just as absolutist and missionary about politics and economics and rights as you are about religion. You're missionaries. You say there's only our way. This is the Chinese response to this. But here are the ideas of liberal democracy. By liberal, Brett, we don't mean, oh, there should be welfare and unions and all sorts of things to help the poor. We mean free, liberal, liberty, free. Rights. I have rights to freely do things, and the government cannot impose on those rights. The government can't limit my rights. That's what liberal means. So liberal depends on, key term, individual human rights. What are those? Private property. Government, you can't seize my stuff. It's mine. I bought it, I own it. Government, you can't take it. The French Revolution was all about this because King Louis XVI could certainly take it, and so could Louis XIV, and on, right? Kings could do whatever kings wanted to do. An independent judiciary and fair trials. The individual has a right to be tried by a jury, not just like the king says, kill him, arrest him, torture him, whatever. Torture was normal in Europe. Both religious torture from the Catholic Inquisition and also political torture from the kings. And so they demanded that the human body itself had an individual right. You cannot put your hands on and torture my body, right? So there's a liberty there. French Revolution was all about this. Free assembly. China doesn't allow people to gather and protest and such. They don't allow free assembly because that can turn into revolution. Free speech. China doesn't allow free speech as much as the West. Rule of law, not of men. Kings made laws. Now they're saying, and so kings were above laws. Now they're saying laws should be able to arrest kings, presidents, and everybody else. Thus, Richard Nixon getting, almost arrested for breaking the law when he was president of the United States. Equality. The French Revolution was all about, look, the nobles and the priests, they don't pay taxes, all sorts of stuff. They get special privileges. The common people should have the same equal rights and privileges as anybody else. Freedom of religion, separate church and state. State cannot control my religion. China does not allow free religion. Religious organizations have to, Justin, you with me?
Yeah.
Religious organizations have to register with the Chinese government and let Chinese Communist Party officials monitor the church services. You've got to be registered. If you're Christian, if you're Buddhist, if you're Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, Taoist, whatever. And finally, the democracy part of liberal democracy. It shouldn't be based on who your father is, dynasties, kings. No, we should be able to elect our representatives, and our representatives should make the law. The laws come from the people through democracy. That's liberal democracy in a nutshell. And that's what happened with the French Revolution and the American Revolution. That's when it became normal. While the French Revolution is going on, this is when McCartney comes to Qianlong. Now,